Azure provides many different services and resources for us to use. We may use some of these services and resources to build our solution. And we need a way to connect these services and resources together so we can achieve something. So that is what Azure Virtual Network or VNET allows us to do at its core. It basically enables communication among the resources, and it allows those resources to be accessible over the internet or accessible from the on-premises network. It even allows those resources to be accessible by the user. In addition to this, virtual networks by default creates a segmentation or isolation boundary. So when we create a virtual network, by default it will have at least one subnet, and we can create additional subnets if you want. Although the resources within these two subnets can communicate with each other, but it cannot communicate with resources in other VNet. Let's say we have another VNet and it has one subnet, we have some resource deployed in it, then the resources within this particular VNet cannot access the resources within this VNet unless we enable that communication explicitly. So in a way, the VNet is going to provide us segmentation boundary, so we can kind of keep our resources isolated from each other. And all of the network addressable resources within a VNet will have private IP by default. But if we want those resources to be accessible over the internet, then we can assign public IPs to them. And with the VNet, we have options to inspect and filter any incoming and outgoing traffic. So we can use things like Azure Firewall or Network Security Group to inspect and filter incoming or outgoing traffic. And we can even create our own custom route for a particular network traffic. So we can explicitly route a particular traffic through one of the device, for example. Now we have seen that we can have multiple VNets, but in some cases we may want to enable communication between these VNets. Right? So we have some service deployed here and some service deployed here. Yes, it is good to have this isolation, but in some cases you might want to have resources separated in two different VNets, but you might want to enable communication between them. And you can do that using something called VNet peering. So once you have enabled VNet peering between these two virtual networks, then the resources within this particular network can access resources on this particular network as if it is part of the same network. And also resources on this particular VNet can access resources on this VNet, because VNet peering is bidirectional. But let's say we have some platform as a service that we want to consume from this particular virtual network. Let's say, for example, we have storage account. Storage is a platform as a service, and we want to access the storage account from this virtual network. So to do this, what we can do is we can create something called service endpoint, and with the service endpoint, this particular virtual network will be able to access this storage account. So this is another option. So normally when you have resources in two different VNets, you'll be able to connect those VNets together using VNet peering. So the resources within those networks can communicate with each other. But if you have some sort of platform as a service like storage account, and you want that storage account to be accessed by some resources within this network, then the most common option is to use something called service endpoint. So you can create service endpoint within this virtual network for this particular storage account, and then you can use that service endpoint from this VNet to access that storage account. Okay, so this is another option. Now this is all good, but let's imagine that we have on-premises network as well. Let's say we have an on-premises network and we want to connect this on-premises network to this virtual network. How do we do this? The way we can connect this on-premises network to this Azure's virtual network is something called VPN. So we can use site-to-site VPN to create a communication channel between this VNet and this on-premises network. So network traffic can flow from this network to this network. And one thing to remember is this site-to-site VPN, because this is a VPN, the traffic is going to flow through the public internet. Although it is going through an encrypted channel, it is still flowing through a public internet. Okay. But when we are using VNet peering, the communication between the two VNets are happening through Microsoft's backbone network, which is not an internet, which is internal network used by Microsoft. And the traffic between these two peered VNets are flowing through that Microsoft's backbone. But when we are using site-to-site VPN to connect on-premises network to virtual network within Azure, then the traffic will be flowing through public internet. But this is very secure because this is one of the standard technology now, and the channel is an encrypted channel. Nobody will be able to intercept and make any sense out of message which are flowing between this on-premises network and this virtual network. Similar to site-to-site VPN, let's say for example we have a laptop used by one user and this laptop need to be connected with this VNET for some reason. Then we can use the same concept here as well. We can create a VPN channel, but this time we'll be using point-to-site VPN. So this is a slight variation of site-to-site VPN. Here we are just connecting a single device to this virtual network. And again the traffic will be flowing through public internet here. But in some cases, this might not be desirable. You might want a way to connect your on-premises network to Azure without using the internet. And this is where Microsoft provides a solution called ExpressRoute. With ExpressRoute, you'll have a dedicated line between your on-premises network and Azure. So the communication between your on-premises network and these virtual networks can be happening through this dedicated line rather than over the public internet. Okay. Now, if you go back to the beginning, you can see from this that Azure Virtual Network is not just about connecting resources. It is much more than that. You'll be able to do almost all the things that you can do in your on-premises network infrastructure in Azure as well. It provides many different services and options for us to configure the network to make it suitable for our business. Okay, so that is all I wanted to talk about virtual network in this video. I hope this is useful. Thank you.